Good day, everyone. Welcome to eLearning Hub, signing on to give you another insight. Have you ever wondered how a single message is spoken in one corner of the world can resonate across thousands of miles and bridge entirely different cultures in an instant? Welcome to the era of globalized communication. Today, we're exploring globalization in communication, how it expands our social communities, shapes our local traditions, and challenges us to build a true intercultural competence in a connected world. At its core, globalization isn't just about trade or technology. It's about people. It represents an explosion of social interconnectedness, bringing together diverse nations into shared digital and physical communities. As borders blur, a shared language of connection evolves. But true global communication goes far beyond vocabulary. It requires mastering core skills: active listening, thoughtful speaking, nuanced reading, clear writing, and perhaps most importantly, interpreting nonverbal cues. When we refine these skills, we move past simple interaction and truly begin to embrace cultural diversity. However, communication never happens in a vacuum. Culture and context dictate how we express ourselves and interpret others. Cultural anthropologist Edward T. Hall famously highlighted context as the overall environment, stimuli, and ambience surrounding an interaction. Whether a culture relies heavily on direct words or subtle situational cues, understanding context is the key to adapting a genuinely multicultural perspective. This brings us to a fascinating dynamic: the interplay between the local and the global. Local communication is deeply rooted in heritage and community identity. It's how traditions are preserved. On the flip side, global communication acts as a powerful transformative force. As global ideas flow into local spaces, traditional communication conventions adapt, creating a dynamic, constantly evolving landscape. So, how do we navigate this complex world? Through intercultural communication. It means actively understanding and valuing our differences, recognizing the environments where diverse backgrounds intersect, and tackling the real communication challenges that arise. By continually sharpening both our spoken words and nonverbal understanding, we build intercultural competence, turning cultural diversity from a barrier into our greatest collective strength. Have you ever felt misunderstood when talking to someone from a different background? Even with the best intentions, intercultural communication can easily break down. Today, we're looking at the main barriers: ethnocentrism, stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination. To understand how this works in real life, let's follow a single team scenario and see how these four barriers interact and build upon one another. First is ethnocentrism. This occurs when we use our own cultural norms as the standard to judge others, believing our way of thinking is inherently superior. Consider a global project meeting between John and Kevin, an international colleague who recently joined the team. John comes from a high assertiveness culture where jumping into conversations and arguing points directly is seen as engagement. Kevin, coming from a high respect reflective culture, waits quietly for a clear pause before speaking. Instead of recognizing a cultural difference, John thinks the right way to collaborate is to speak up aggressively. Kevin's silence means he lacks confidence or has nothing to offer. By measuring Kevin strictly against his own cultural rulebook, John completely dismisses Kevin's perspective. Ethnocentrism creates a critical communication barrier because it destroys empathy and active listening. It forces the communicator to interpret cultural differences, not as different, but as wrong or inferior, causing immediate breakdown and resentment. Second is stereotyping. These are oversimplified generalizations or exaggerated assumptions about an entire group of people. In that same meeting, John's team needs someone to handle client presentation on leadership and public relations. John looks at Kevin and thinks, well, Kevin is from East Asia, so he must be amazing at back-end tech and data entry, but definitely too passive to handle client pitches. Even if a stereotype seems positive or neutral on the surface, like assuming strong math or technical skills, it strips away Kevin's individual talent, leadership capabilities, and actual background in marketing. Stereotyping replaces authentic person-to-person communication with rigid cognitive shortcuts. Instead of interacting with who Kevin's actually is, John is communicating with a mental caricature. Now, let's look at how these cognitive mindsets escalate into emotional hostility. How ethnocentrism leads to prejudice. Because John believes his direct communication style is superior, his frustration with Kevin's quiet approach turns into an emotional dislike. He begins to feel irritation whenever Kevin speaks, assuming Kevin is uncooperative or incompetent. How stereotyping leads to prejudice. Because John pigeonholes Kevin as purely a backroom data guy, he develops a deep-seated bias that Kevin is incapable of executive-level thinking. Third, prejudice. This is an internal negative attitude or feeling towards someone based solely on their cultural group identity, formed without real experience or justification. Now, before the next project phase even starts, John approaches every interaction with Kevin with hesitation, suspicion, and annoyance. When Kevin offers an idea, John interprets it through a biased lens, viewing Kevin's cautious phrasing not as careful strategic planning, but as weakness. Prejudice acts as a psychological noise filter. It corrupts incoming messages, causing the biased listener to distort or reject valid information simply because of who is delivering it. How prejudice escalates to discrimination. Left unchecked. Internal feelings don't stay hidden for long. When prejudiced feelings drive outward behavior, prejudice transforms directly into discrimination. Fourth, discrimination. Unlike internal thoughts or feelings, discrimination is the overt, unfair action taken to exclude, isolate, or disadvantage someone based on their group identity. Because of John's internal prejudice, he takes physical action. He intentionally leaves Kevin off critical project email threads, exclude him from strategy launches where key decisions are made, and assigns the high visibility client presentation to a less qualified peer. Kevin is systematically silenced and deprived of professional opportunities. Discrimination completely destroys the communication bridge. It moves beyond misunderstanding to active exclusion, creating a hostile environment where cross-cultural dialogue stops entirely. depriving teams of diverse insights and innovation. Communication theorists Hybels and Weber emphasize that clear communication requires shared perceptual points of view, a balance that is naturally challenged when interacting across cultures. To summarize the chain reaction, ethnocentrism, my way is the only right way, and stereotyping, they are all the same, feed into prejudice. I dislike and mistrust you based on these assumptions, which ultimately drives discrimination. I will actively exclude and silence you. To overcome this chain reaction, our goal in intercultural communication is to resist translating different than me into less than me. By replacing judgment with curiosity and building a flexible repertoire of communication approaches, we transform cultural differences from obstacle into valuable opportunities for genuine connection. Recognizing the barriers to communication is only half the battle. The real goal is learning how to dismantle them. How do we move past misinterpretations, bias, and stereotyping? By actively cultivating strategic habits that bridge cultural gaps. First, engage in mindfulness. Mindfulness means staying fully present in interactions without immediate judgment. Consider John in a global business meeting. By recognizing his tendency to interrupt and assume a dominant style, he pauses, becoming aware of his bias and adjusting his tone to match the group's dynamic. Second, pay attention to words and actions. Self-reflections helps us notice our own communication patterns before they lead to misunderstandings. By carefully observing both our delivery and our audience responses, we can adapt our style in real time to fit multicultural settings. Third, control assumptions. Oversimplifying people based on stereotypes damages collaboration. For example, during a project, Sarah catches herself assuming her teammate David won't contribute due to cultural stereotypes. By actively challenging those assumptions, she opens the door to a genuine productive partnership. Fourth, engage in transpection. Transpection goes a step beyond a simple sympathy. It means trying to see and feel a situation directly through another person's cultural lens. In workshop discussion on sensitive issues, transpection allows participants to truly appreciate why someone holds a particular belief. Lastly, gain knowledge. Misunderstanding often stem from simple unfamiliarity, like Alex preparing for an international conference, taking time to research the customs, traditions, and social etiquette of other countries, transform uncertainty into genuine cultural sensitivity. To summarize, overcoming intercultural barriers isn't a passive process. It requires active effort. By practicing mindfulness, controlling our assumptions, learning about others, and engaging in transpection, we replace division with understanding. When we choose empathy or judgment, cultural diversity becomes our greatest strength. In a world that is more connected than ever, we regularly interact with people across cultures. But what does intercultural communication really mean? Simply put, it's the process of exchanging messages, ideas, and information between individuals or groups from distinct cultural backgrounds. It is where different cultural identities, each with unique values, beliefs, norms, and communication styles meet. The main goal, to establish genuine understanding and build meaningful connections despite our differences. Intercultural communication is a dynamic process. It focuses on how culture shapes the way we express ourselves and how others interpret our intent. This includes both what we say and how we say it, encompassing both verbal and nonverbal cues. Mastering it requires navigating subtle cultural nuances and adapting our strategies to remain respectful and effective in any setting. Our starting point is understanding that constructive, effective communication is essential to prevent costly breakdowns and misunderstandings. Whether you are an expatriate adapting to a new country, an employee navigating a multinational corporation, or a student learning a foreign language, this is a vital life skill. Developing intercultural competence helps us collaborate smoothly and ensures we avoid unintended offense in a diverse environments. To summarize, intercultural communication isn't just about overcoming language barriers. It's about opening our minds to different perspectives. When we actively adapt and seek to understand, we transform potential miscommunications into opportunities for real connection. Building strong cross-cultural relationships doesn't happen by accident. It takes deliberate, thoughtful action. Whether you're traveling, studying, or working in a global team, taking a few initial steps can completely transform your intercultural interactions. Let's look at 7 practical ways to enhance your global communication skills. First, display willingness to find common ground. Learning just a few basic expressions in another language like hello or thank you shows immediate respect. For instance, when an executive greets his Japanese colleagues with a simple konnichiwa, instantly sets a warm, positive tone for the meeting. Second, seek guidance from cultural experts. Before entering a new environment, consult people who know the local culture well. Learning subtle norms in advance, such as removing your shoes before entering a home, helps you navigate community spaces with confidence and respect. Third, adapt your behavior. Rather than expecting others to conform to your habits, respond to differences with patience. If a roommate's daily routine clashes with your comfort, calmly explaining your needs rather than reacting with irritation turns a potential conflict into a constructive conversation. Fourth, ensure clear comprehension. Avoid assuming that everyone is on the same page. In multinational meetings, pausing to ask colleagues to recap key takeaways allows you to clarify misunderstandings on the spot. Demonstrate willingness to apologize. If you make an accidental cultural misstep, like handing a gift with the wrong hand in a certain regions, a prompt sincere apology paired with a willingness to learn diffuses tension immediately. Lastly, gain insights through media and reflection. Watching local TV shows offers a window into everyday social dynamic and humor. Afterwards, reflecting on these real-world experiences with peers allows you to exchange strategies and continuously deepen your cultural awareness. To summarize, enhancing intercultural communication is an ongoing journey of learning, adapting, and listening. By applying these simple strategies, you replace guesswork with genuine connections across any culture. In today's global economy, cross-cultural communication is no longer just an asset. It is a strategic necessity. driven by technology, global business expansion, and remote workforces. Success depends on our ability to exchange ideas effectively across cultural boundaries. Cross-cultural communication involves understanding, adapting to, and respecting how people from different backgrounds communicate and perceive the world. In an organizational setting, key factors influence these interactions every day, including language differences, high context versus low context styles, nonverbal cues, and power distance dynamics. To see how these dynamics play out in the real world, let's look at three common workplace scenarios. First, business negotiations. When a European team focused on direct terms negotiates with a Japanese team that prioritizes subtle relationship building, the European team might interpret indirectness as a lack of commitment, while the Japanese team finds the direct approach abrupt. Second, team collaboration. In a software project spanning the US, India, and Brazil, American members focus on efficiency. Indian members prioritize relationship building before work, and Brazilian members foster a warm, humorous environment. Without mutual understanding, coordinating tasks can become challenging. And third, customer service. When Philippine call center representatives bring their natural cultural warmth to UK customers who expect formal tone, the interaction can feel overly informal, potentially leading to dissatisfaction. To wrap up, effective cross-cultural communication requires recognizing these differences, adjusting our communication strategies, and maintaining open-mindedness. When we actively bridge these cultural gaps, we foster true understanding, collaboration, and success across borders. Have you ever noticed how different cultures approach business? What seems like a straightforward meeting to one person might feel rushed or impersonal to another. This brings us to the concept of high context versus low context culture, a framework that shapes how we form relationships, communicate, manage time, and solve problems. Let's look at low context cultures, common in North America and Western Europe. Here, communication is explicit, direct, and fact-focused. Personal relationships are separated from tasks, and contracts define expectations. Take Alex, a project manager, who presents a data-heavy report expecting immediate agreement. To his surprise, his team probes for additional guarantees. In low-context environments, trust is built on verifiable data, individual accountability, and explicit details. In contrast, high-context cultures prevalent across Asia, the Middle East, and Africa prioritize trust, group harmony, and long-term relationships over quick transactions. Messages are often indirect, relying heavily on situational context and nonverbal cues. Consider Rahul, a negotiator who takes European partners out for dinner to discuss family and interest before diving into business, while his European counterparts expect direct negotiation right away. Rahul is building the vital personal rapport that forms the foundation of high-context business decisions. When comparing these two frameworks across five key areas, clear patterns emerge. First, let's look at association, how cultures build and maintain relationships. In high-context cultures, relationships are deeply rooted, long-term, and group-centered. Trust isn't built overnight. It requires shared history, mutual obligations, and continuous connection. Personal and professional lives often overlap, and decisions are made with the collective group's well-being in mind. In contrast, low-context cultures view relationships through a pragmatic, task-oriented lens. Connections are formed quickly to accomplish specific goals and can end just as swiftly when the task is complete. Personal identity is tied to individual achievement rather than group affiliation. Next is interaction, the way messages are transmitted and interpreted. In high context communication, what is left unsaid is often more important than what is explicitly spoken. Meaning is embedded in nonverbal cues such as tone of voice, facial expressions, posture, and even silence. Preserving harmony and saving face are paramount, so disagreement is often expressed indirectly. Conversely, low context communication relies on absolute verbal precision. The responsibility for clarity falls entirely on the speaker. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Nonverbal cues take a backseat to explicit words, detailed contracts, and direct feedback. Third, we examine territoriality, how individuals perceive physical space and boundaries. In high-context societies, space is generally viewed as communal and flexible. People tend to stand closer during conversations. Touch is more frequent, and personal boundaries are fluid. Sharing physical space is seen as a natural way to foster closeness and trust. In low-context societies, personal space is highly valued and protected. Individuals maintain a comfortable physical distance, value privacy, and place clear boundaries between personal belongings and shared areas. Invading someone's physical or personal space without permission can feel uncomfortable or respectful bounds. Fourth, temporality addresses how time is conceptualized and managed. High context cultures operate on a polychronic view of time. Time is seen as fluid, flexible, and secondary to human relationships. Schedules and deadlines adapt to the needs of the people involved. If a conversation runs over, the relationship takes priority over the clock. Low context cultures adopt a monochronic view of time. Here, time is finite commodity, something to be saved, spent, or wasted. Efficiency, strict adherence to schedules, and promptness are valued above almost everything else. Time is money, and staying on schedule demonstrates professional respect. Lastly, let's explore learning, how knowledge is absorbed and passed on. In high context environments, learning is largely observational, intuitive, and holistic. Knowledge is acquired by watching experienced mentors, absorbing the surrounding environment, and practicing within a group. Learning happens through synthesis, understanding the big picture before diving into details. In low context environments, learning is analytical, structured, and instructional. Knowledge is broken down into sequential steps, clear manuals, and explicit guidelines. Learners are encountered to ask questions, process information independently, and proceed at their own individual speed. As we bring this analysis to a close, it is important to remember that no country, organization, or individual sits strictly at one absolute extreme. Communication is a spectrum, and true cultural competence lies in adaptability. By learning to recognize where our global colleagues fall on this continuum, we move away from judging differences as inefficient or overly aggressive. Instead, we build cultural agility, enabling us to bridge gaps, foster genuine respect, and lead successful global partnerships. It is often said that actions speak louder than words. And in cross-cultural communication, how we move, stand, or make eye contact can carry even more weight than what we actually say. Nonverbal cues act as a silent language shaped by our cultural upbringing. Because these signals operate automatically, we often interpret someone else's nonverbal behavior through our own cultural lens. Without awareness, these subtle differences can easily lead to unintended misunderstandings. Let's break down the key nonverbal domains where cultural expectations clash. First, let's examine gesture and facial expressions. These are two of the most immediate nonverbal signals we send, yet their meanings can change completely across borders. Gestures and greetings. Physical greetings reflect a culture's value around status, warmth, and boundary. An American professional offers a firm handshake to signal confidence, strength, and equality. However, in Japan, business etiquette prioritizes modesty and respect, making a softer handshake or a gentle bow customary, where an overly firm grip can feel aggressive or domineering. Facial expressions. How we demonstrate attentiveness varies widely. In South Korea, maintaining a neutral, serious expression during a presentation or lecture is a sign of deep respect, self-control, and focused listening. However, a professor in the UK, accustomed to Western norms where engagement is shown through smiling, nodding, and visible expressions, might misinterpret that quiet composure as disinterest, confusion, or boredom. Next, let's explore three additional nonverbal domains: eye contact, proxemics, and emotional displays. Eye contact. In Western cultures, direct eye contact signals honesty, confidence, and transparency. But in many Asian cultures, prolonged eye contact can feel confrontational or disrespectful, particularly when speaking to superiors or colleagues. During video calls, what feels like attentiveness to a Western manager might feel intense or uncomfortable to a Japanese team. Personal space and proxemics. Proxemics refers to the physical distance we keep from others. In Middle Eastern cultures, closer physical proximity during conversation communicates warmth, trust, and involvement. In contrast, in countries like Canada, personal space is highly valued, and standing too close can make someone feel uncomfortable or crowded. Emotional displays. Finally, rules around public emotional expression differ significantly. While a French tourist may be accustomed to vibrant, expressive facial displays to convey feelings in public, local cultural norms in China emphasize emotional restraint and subtlety to maintain social harmony. To summarize, mastering nonverbal communication isn't about memorizing every gesture. It's about recognizing that silent signals carry cultural context. By learning to observe without jumping to conclusions, we prevent misunderstandings, build trust, and navigate diverse cultural environments with genuine sensitivity and respect. When communicating across cultures, language barriers present one of the most immediate challenges. Consider a situation where Jack, an English speaker, needs to collaborate with Yamato, who speaks Japanese. Without a shared spoken language, how can they build rapport? In these moments, effective communication relies on multimodal strategies. Jack can convey intention through facial expressions and nonverbal cues, rely on drawings and visual aids, or bring in an interpreter. Finding creative ways to bridge language gaps demonstrates respect and sets the stage of mutual trust. Beyond language barriers, how we deliver a message depends heavily on the medium we use. In face-to-face communication, interactions are multimodal and dynamic. Listeners interpret tone of voice, body language, and facial expressions alongside words. This allows the speakers to adjust their level of formality instantly based on the listener's social status, position, or relationship. In written communication, tone and body language are completely absent. Writers must rely entirely to precise word choices, careful sentence structure, and grammatical correctness to convey the appropriate attitude and prevent misinterpretation. To help us select the appropriate tone in any situation, linguists categorize language into five distinct registers. These registers form a spectrum based on two key factors: social distance and the expectation of feedback. As we move from top to bottom, the language transitions from rigid, one-way declarations to highly personal, fluid conversations. First, frozen register. This sits at the most formal end of the spectrum. The language is static, traditional, and etched in history, meaning it never changes and requires no active feedback or response. Viewers experience this during shared solemn rituals such as reciting national anthems, pledges of allegiance, school creeds, and traditional religious prayers. Second, formal register, used in official, ceremonial, or professional settings. Here, language is one-way or structured two-way communication, meant to inform or present. It follows a strict standard grammar, avoids slang, and uses a specialized vocabulary, such as in court proceedings, corporate presentations, official speeches, and technical reports. Third, consultative register. This represents a crucial bridge. It is formal but highly interactive. It occurs specifically when an experts offer guidance, assistance, or specialized knowledge to a client or receiver. Active feedback is essential here to ensure clarity. Example: include doctor-patient consultations, lawyer-client meetings, teacher-student discussions, or employer-employee check-ins. Fourth, casual register. As social distance decrease, we enter relaxed everyday communication. Language here is group-focused, fluid, and informal, prioritizing quick communication over perfect grammar. It relies heavily on slang, contractions, and group jargon, typical in chats among friends, family dinners, personal text messages, and informal emails. Fourth, casual register. As social distance decreases, we enter relaxed everyday communication. Language here is group-focused, fluid, and informal, prioritizing quick communication over perfect grammar. It relies heavily on slang, contractions, and group jargon, typical in chats among friends, family dinners, personal text messages, and informal emails. Intimate register. At the most informal end, this register is reserved exclusively for individuals who share deep private bonds. Words here are often coded, shorthand, or completely unique to the participants. It incorporates pet names, shared jokes, and terms of endearment, such as private expressions between romantic partners or family nicknames that outsiders would not understand. To wrap up, Understanding language registers allow us to navigate social and professional situations with confidence. Using the wrong register, like speaking casually in a job interview or using formal speech with a close friend, can create awkwardness or offense. By matching our register to our context, whether face-to-face or in writing, we communicate with clarity, comfort, and respect. Language is never static. It shifts and adapts depending on how we are speaking to, where we are, and what we are trying to achieve. Drawing from research by Lin and Manhub, linguists categorize these shifts across three main axes: local versus global, spoken versus written, and everyday versus specialized discourse. To make sense of how these dimensions interact, Amar Manhoof defined 8 distinct domains of language variation. By examining these domains, we can see exactly why the way we chat with neighbor differs so vastly from how an academic writes a global research paper. Let's break down how these domains work in practice. First, let's explore the local domains. These 4 domains are deeply rooted in specific communities where speakers share a common culture, geography, or immediate social context. Because everyone involved shares the same background knowledge, language here relies heavily in local slang, shortcuts, and informal norms. First, local everyday written. This includes informal public notices like neighborhood flyers or posters advertising room rentals. These texts are written specifically for locals, often using shorthand expressions unique to that area. Second, local everyday spoken. This is the most spontaneous form of communication, such as casual chats between neighbors over a garden fence. It relies on colloquialisms, local accents, and relaxed grammar because mutual understanding is already established. Third, local specialized written. Here, language becomes more technical but remains localized, like a community organization's newsletter or a local society's website. It uses a specific terminology that caters to a particular group's shared interest. Fourth, local specialized spoken. This occurs when specialized group vocabulary is used verbally in local setting. For example, gamers in a neighborhood internet cafe using niche gaming jargon. Outsiders might find it incomprehensible, but to the local group, it is precise and efficient. Next, we shift to the global domains. Unlike local contexts, global communication bridges gaps between people from diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds who do not share local slang or context. To remain effective, language in these domains must be standard, accessible, and explicitly structured. Fifth, global everyday written, designed for a broad international leadership, such as articles in global magazines or international news outlets. This style avoids regional idioms or confusing local metaphors, so anyone around the world can easily understand it. Six, global everyday spoken. This occurs in informal conversations between people from different countries, like international travelers chatting at an airport. They rely on standardized, polite language and clear pronunciation to ensure mutual understanding. Seventh, global specialized written. This represents formal academic and professional writing, such as peer-reviewed research journals distributed internationally. It adheres to strict standardized terminology and eschews colloquialism to maintain professional precision across borders. Global specialized spoken. This is used when experts from around the world meet to discuss technical topics, such as researchers presenting at an international conference. It combines specialized field terminology with standardized international English to communicate complex ideas clearly. To wrap up, Mabub's 8 domains remind us that effective communication isn't just about using correct grammar. It's about matching our language to the environment and the audience. When we recognize whether a situation calls for a local informality or global standardization, we can select the exact tone, vocabulary, and medium needed to bridge gaps and build genuine understanding. Language is never static. It shifts, grows, and adapts over time. Today, we are exploring dialectal variation, examining how culture, history, geography, and social identity shape the diverse ways we speak and write. Let's begin with the foundation of linguistic variation. First, the variability in language or dialects. Language is constantly evolving. Dialectal variation reflects changes driven by social dynamics, geographic location, individual expression, and group identity. Recognizing this variability is key to understanding the sheer richness of human communication. Second, dialectal diversity. Dialects represent the distinct features unique to specific speech communities. For example, the term Caribbean dialect points to shared vocabulary and sentence patterns across Caribbean nations, showing how languages strengthens community bonds and cultural identity. Historical interactions often create entirely new language varieties. Creole formation. Creole language arises from the contact between colonizing languages and the native languages of colonized people. In the Caribbean, Creoles reflect historical encounter between European colonizers and West African languages, blending distinct traditions into rich new linguistic systems. Patois and regional differences. Historically, referring to sounds unfamiliar to European listeners, Patois now describes distinct regional dialects. In Jamaica, Patois refers to the English-based Creole used in everyday life, showcasing the vibrant nuanced linguistic landscape of the island. Within a single society, different varieties often serve different roles. Standard language in Creole, standardized varieties like English or French, hold prestige and are used in official, educational, and formal settings. In contrast, Creoles are typically used for informal, daily interaction. Many Caribbean nations operate in the dual linguistic space, balancing formal European languages with informal Creoles. Informal expression or slang. Slang brings trendiness and informality to speech. While popular in casual conversations, it is usually avoided in formal writing. When slang is used in text, placing it in quotation marks helps signal its informal nature and preserve clarity. Finally, we see how global reach and cultural belief systems shape language. Varieties of English or foreign English, spoken by people from non-native linguistic backgrounds worldwide. Foreign English incorporates unique accents and local structures, constantly enriching the global English landscape. Rastafarian influence or Rasta English. Indigenous to Jamaica, Rashta English demonstrates how language carries deep philosophical beliefs. Expressions like I and I emphasize spiritual quality. Erie conveys positivity, and Ital food refers to natural cuisine, showing how language serves as a direct vehicle for Rastafarian ideology. To conclude, from global dialects and creoles to regional slang and culturally rooted varieties like Rasta English, language variation is a celebration of human diversity. By understanding these variations, we communicate with greater empathy, respect, and cultural awareness. As we bring this presentation to a close, let's reflect on the single most important lesson at the heart of cross-cultural communication. Words are only a fraction of the story. Whether we are reading silent nonverbal cues, adapting our language between local and global domains, or adjusting our register to match the formality of a room, true communication is fundamentally about connection and respect. In an increasingly interconnected world, missteps will happen, and that's okay. The goal is not perfection, but cultural agility. The willingness to observe without judging, listen deeply, and adapt our delivery to fit our audience. When we master these nuances, we don't judge bridge language gaps. We build lasting, meaningful relationships across every border. Thank you for your time and engagement. If you found this presentation insightful, please hit the like button, share this video with your fellow learners or colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next topic. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Until next time, stay curious and keep connecting.